Okay, the 31st installment of the MCU in chronological order takes us to Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. The overall plotline of this movie is as follows. Scott Lang, Hope Van Dyne, Hank Pym, and Janet Van Dyne, along with Cassie, get sucked into the quantum realm where they have to face off against Kang the Conqueror, the new big bad of the MCU. Okay, that's the overall premise of this movie. Let's try and make this review as short and sweet as we possibly can. Overall, I thought Ant-Man 3 was okay. I didn't think this was a great movie. I didn't think this was a bad movie. I thought it was just a middle of the road movie. It has things in it that I liked, and it has things in it that I didn't really much enjoy. And I'm going to do my best to illustrate what I liked and what I didn't like. So I think one of the main things that makes this movie very middle of the road for me is that it tries to put high stakes in an Ant-Man movie, and it just doesn't work. Like, the Ant-Man movies were always designed to be palate cleansers and bridge the gap from one event film to another event film. When you try to put high stakes into an Ant-Man movie, it just feels awkward. It just feels weird. Because Ant-Man is not that kind of character who does like these, who should be doing these who should be doing things like Iron Man should be doing, or something like Captain America should be doing. Like, Ant-Man should be stopping like small scale events, like with Yellow Jacket and like with Ghost and in his first two solo outings. This one feels more. This one feels like an Avengers level threat, because you're dealing with Kang the Conqueror, who is somebody who can control space and time, and someone who is known for destroying multiple timelines and erasing them from existence. When you apply that concept into an Ant-Man movie, it's like, whoa, this is way too high scale for something Ant-Man should be doing. Like, he shouldn't be facing off a villain like Kang the Conqueror. Now, that's something that he needs to get the Avengers together and to take this man down. He shouldn't be doing this. It shouldn't be applied to an Ant-Man movie. It just feels awkward and feels janky. Like, yes, even though this is a variant of the Kang character, it still feels weird and it still feels awkward. And not only that, Ant-Man movies are not known for having a serious, somber tone to them. This movie tries to have a more serious tone, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't fit the character of Ant-Man. Ant-Man works when the tone is light and comedic with elements of seriousness peppered all throughout. When you try to do it the exact opposite, it doesn't work. It doesn't fit the character. And that actually creates some tonal issues with this movie, because Peyton Reed's trying to make a more serious movie, but at the same time, he has to stay true to the characters, and it feels awkward at times. For example, you have the character of MODOK, who is played by Corey Stoll. This version of MODOK is actually a mutated version of Darren Criss. After he got sucked into the quantum realm, he was transformed into MODOK. His character, in the first 3 seconds of MODOK appearing, he was taken seriously, and then once he took the helmet off and you see like the superimposed face of Corey Stoll, he immediately turns into a joke. Now, I understand MODOK is a character from the comic books. I'm not overly familiar with MODOK as a character, but I know he's a character that is whose humor is more tongue in cheek, as opposed to being a flat out joke. Basically, it's the idea of this small being so dangerous and vicious, and there's like a dark irony / sense of humor to it. If you would have applied that to the character of MODOK, it would have worked. Instead, you played MODOK up for laughs, and you kind of killed his whole mystique and his whole thing. Not only that, MODOK should have never taken off his helmet. I was fine with just the flashbacks, of seeing Darren Criss be formed into MODOK without having to actually see the man's actual face, because that took away the entire mystique of the character, and that's where the comedy comes in. And not only that, this movie takes MODOK in really weird and questionable directions. You have this running thing of him being a dick and doing dickish things, and then at the end he kind of sort of redeems himself by saving Cassie from Kang. And there's not really a lot of buildup, because Cassie and MODOK share a scene 3 minutes before the sacrifice happens, where Cassie says it's not too late to not be a dick. This would have actually worked if Cassie throughout the entire movie was trying to get to MODOK and trying to have MODOK find his humanity. Because throughout the entire movie, MODOK is refusing to be called Darren, his real name. He wants to be known as MODOK because he's a different being now. it would have made more sense if throughout the movie Cassie was trying to help MODOK rediscover his humanity, and actually would have been good for Darren Criss as a character, because the first time we saw him prior to this, he was a villain. There was nothing really redeeming about him. I mean, there were elements there. There were elements that the first Ant-Man movie had elements that could have been further expanded upon if that script had some self-confidence to it, or you could have made Darren Criss into a more tragic character, but we didn't get that. We only got hints and elements of that, and that's not enough. And that's not enough for the character of Darren Criss to go on a character arc, especially when you bring him back and you don't really expand upon anything. And that's the biggest problem with MODOK. There was no expansion upon his character arc. His face turn kind of happens at the last minute. So I wasn't really overly thrilled about that. I mean, it was nice seeing Darren Criss come back, I guess. But MODOK as a character could have been handled so much better. Not only that, he's more or less played like a lackey of Kang, and there's literally one scene where Kane pretty much shows that he can kill MODOK if he wanted to. So you kind of get the threat of MODOK away. After the movie kind of sort of build him up a little bit as being the hunter, like Kang's primary hunter. The mechanism designed only for killing, this very ominous thing, and then they make a joke out of it. I mean, the joke could have worked if MODOK wasn't joking along with them. That's just how and that's where the dark humor of MODOK can come from. Like, you can make fun of the character, but then you gotta have him do something to have him still be a threat. Be like, okay, you wanna make fun of me? Pop, boom, and then the joke stopped. That's what I meant by MODOK should be more of a tongue-in-cheek character, that at first you don't take him seriously, that once he does something that is actually what his namesake is all about, that's where you start to take him seriously, because oh, okay, there's really something more to this. We didn't get that in this movie. We got just a character played for laughs. Not a big fan. In terms of how the actual main cast is, they're fine. Like, I like Paul Rudd as the character of Ant-Man. I like the idea of Scott Lang being an author and people liking him. I do not like the scene where his family is telling him, "Hey, Scott, what have you done with your life? Like, did you not know that the man's a best-selling author?" It's established in Miss Marvel that he had a podcast, but that's mysteriously not mentioned in this movie. I don't know why. But yeah, like, when you actually look at what's happening in the opening few minutes of this movie with Scott Lang, you see that he is doing stuff with his life. He's just not doing avenging because there's no threats for him to avenge. The biggest threat was already avenged. What's left for him? What do you want him to do? What, he has to turn to Ant-Man to save a cat out of a tree? Come on now, let's be real. So yeah, that little scene I don't like. And this whole movie pretty much tries to play it up as Scott Lang being lackadaisical with his work as Ant-Man, and there's nothing really he's doing. There's no threats happening around him for him to become the Ant-Man. That's why I didn't really care for that sort of thing. The direction they took the character of Cassie, I'm of two minds about it. I like the fact that she's becoming a character that's going to follow in her father's footsteps, becoming the character of Stature, I believe her name is. I like how she has a granddaughter relationship with Hank Pym. I like that sort of stuff. I would like to actually see more of Cassie and Hank Pym and a granddaughter, grandfather type of role, because I think you could have gotten some good stuff out of that, and especially with Michael Douglas. I do not really care for the fact of Cassie being a jailbird like her dad, and it's done for the reasons of her being more like a protester and stuff like that. Like, where did this come from? Like, I don't understand this whole thing. And not only that, this entire movie is like an allegory for Antifa and stuff like that, and I'm just not a big fan of that. Like, when you put that heavy-handed political nature in an Ant-Man movie, it just seems so weird, because these movies shouldn't be about these heavy topics. An Ant-Man movie should be about having fun. And this movie has moments where it's like having fun, but like I said, it takes itself more seriously than it actually should. And it kind of just ruins it. Doesn't, I wouldn't say it ruins the experience, but it dampers the experience of watching an Ant-Man movie for fun, because now you're dealing with these heavy-handed themes of civil unrest and revolutions and shit like that. And I don't want to see this in an Ant-Man movie. Like, this is stuff that's good for X-Men, because they deal with that sort of thing, not Ant-Man. Ant-Man shouldn't be the leader of Viva la Revolution. He should be going on these wacky capers and just having movies that are just about having fun, and not stuff like this. And again, all that applies to the character of Cassie and what the movie is trying to present her as, which I wasn't really overly thrilled of. Not only that, I thought Catherine Newton as an actress, I thought she was okay. I think people gave her maybe a little too much hate. I mean, then again, I can also see why they gave her a lot of they criticized her a lot, because there are a lot of moments where she's like, where she's just not emoting what she should be emoting in terms of an emotional response. But there are certain scenes where she is okay. Like, I think her and Scott have decent on-screen chemistry, and that's because Paul Rudd's very charismatic, so some of his charm is rubbing off on her just a little bit, but not enough. But it gets the job done for the most part, so I can't fully condemn her. In terms of how the movie handled Hank Pym and Janet, I'm of two minds about this. I like how we get to see more of the quantum realm from Janet's perspective. It was established that she was down there for 30 years, so she experienced and did a lot of things. One of the things she did while in the quantum realm was that she befriended Kang, and at first it was a budding friendship, and she was just trying to help him. Then she realized that Kang was not who he seemed to be, and that he was like this conqueror and destroyer of worlds, and the man who has literally wiped out multiple timelines and should be held in the quantum realm because it's the only place that dampers him from causing any more damage. Janet, realizing this, the only thing she had to do was just destroy Kang's means of escaping the quantum realm, and of course by doing so she pretty much was on the run. The movie also establishes that she had a bit of a relationship with a character called Krylar, played by Bill Murray in a nice little cameo. I do not like the fact that Janet was unfaithful to Hank, and that Hank basically was transformed into a cuck. No, that was really stupid and really, really dumb. Come on, you couldn't have had Hank Pym give old Krylar a knuckle sandwich for banging his wife just so that way he can get his manhood back. I think Hank Pym, I don't like certain things they did with Hank Pym in this movie. They established a grandfather-granddaughter relationship between him and Cassie, but it's not fully explored enough. Even though I do like the idea. I don't like the idea of Hank Pym being cucked and then not standing up for himself. I think that was completely and utterly disrespectful to his character, especially when you watch the first Ant-Man movie, where you don't take shit from nobody, and they give a guy a knuckle sandwich just for opening his mouth about his wife. You know. You couldn't punch Bill Murray in the face and say, hey, listen, you touched my wife? Bam! Get your manhood back, Hank. What the hell? Yeah, I didn't like that whatsoever. Not only that, I think Hank Pym overall is kind of wasted in this movie. I think Michael Douglas is kind of wasted in this movie because he doesn't really do much. Like, he's there, but he's not there. Like, he doesn't have any good character arc or any good character moments, which is a shame. You have Michael Douglas and you don't give him enough to do. I know more. I mean, the first two Ant-Man movies utilized Hank Pym better than this movie did, which is a shame. Speaking of shame, you have Angevine Lily returning as the Wasp, and she's another one who doesn't really do much. She has no character growth. She has no character arc. For the majority of the movie, she's hanging out with her parents, and she's not with the Ant-Man. You know, I would have had Hank and Janet go on their journey together without Hope. I would have had Hope, Cassie and Scott Lang confront Kang together, while Janet and Hank try and find a way to get to them. Instead, you did the exact opposite, and the Wasp is in a side plot that doesn't really do her any favors, and she doesn't really become a focal point until the third act of the movie, where her and Ant-Man finally team up. You know, that was kind of a letdown. Like, this Wasp is totally underutilized in this movie. And maybe that has a lot to do with just Angevine Lily and her political opinions off camera, but that should not affect the integrity of the film. Like, come on already, stop. Be adults and not children. Just because someone doesn't have the same political views as you, that doesn't give you the right to downplay their involvement as certain characters where stories revolve around them. Just because you want to be petty little children, and because because no one likes what you like. Come on, grow up. But yeah, that's my little rant on that over. So yeah, I think Hope is underutilized. Hank is underutilized. Janet, she's more of a focal point in terms of her knowing more about the quantum realm and her having existing relationships with Kang. So she was actually fine for what it was. I thought Michelle Pfeiffer did a good job playing Janet this time around. You know, in certain, I think some of her best scenes are where she's actually interacting with Kang and they're having their conversations. I think those scenes are actually played up really, really well. And there's a nice, serious somberness to them. to really sell the threat of Kang, and I thought this was actually well handled. So speaking of Kang, let's finally talk about Jonathan Majors and his performance in this movie. Now, leading up to this movie and post this movie, everyone was praising Jonathan Majors as if this man found the cure for cancer. Everyone was saying that, oh my God, Jonathan Majors, he rocked the world in this movie. He was like, he was able to part the Red Sea by playing the character of Kang. Like, it was unbelievable. Listen, I saw the same movie you did. He was fine in it. He didn't give a life-changing performance. I'm sorry. Nothing about Jonathan Majors' performance as the character of Kang lit my world on fire. My life was not changed watching this man act as Kang. He was fine in the role. He had that right amount of intimidation. He had that right amount of serious factor. He came across as a legitimate threat. I do not think he didn't give this world-changing performance like Josh Brolin did as Thanos. Like Kang, he was fine. He was fine in the role. I mean, I do appreciate that he was able to give the many different versions of Kang their own distinct personalities, but that doesn't mean that this man put on a life-changing performance. I mean, if anything, when you watch this movie, his version of Kang kind of went out like a chump, and all his serious factor kind of went out the window when Ant-Man of all people beats your ass. So, for all the build-up that Jonathan Majors did as the character of Kang and everything this movie could do to build him up as a serious threat, you kind of threw it out the window when it's Ant-Man who beats him. Ant-Man of all people beats Kang. And that's not a slight against Ant-Man, but he shouldn't be holding his own in combat against Kang the Conqueror. That's just me personally. In terms of the physicality, I thought Jonathan Majors did a good job playing the role. The acting, the performance of Jonathan Majors is actually very awkward because he's giving a very serious performance and he's playing the character totally straight, yet the movie that he's in does not reflect the kind of performance he's putting in, because this is a movie that has moments that are undercut by really bad moments of very bad comedy, and there are moments where this movie does not even take itself very seriously. Like, you have this whole subplot of a revolution and like the people of the quantum realm wanting to take down Kang because they're tired of his stranglehold over them. And this actually plays into Cassie's character, because as I mentioned earlier, at the beginning of the movie, she was put in jail because of a protest, and now she basically becomes the co-leader of a revolution with this other character. And their whole idea and the whole goal of this thing is to take down Kang and get the quantum realm back. Again, you're throwing in political things in an Ant-Man movie where the political aspect should be dialed down remotely, because, again, I'm watching an Ant-Man movie. I want to have fun. I don't want to have political bullshit thrown at me when I'm watching an Ant-Man movie. So, yeah, that aspect I didn't really care for. And, again, you have the whole thing with MODOK, which was played for laughs and was not funny. You have the whole idea of Hank being a cuck because his wife was banging everyone on the quantum realm, acting like a whore. You know, and then you have Jonathan Majors, who's putting on this overly serious performance as the character of Kang, trying to become a threat, and it just doesn't reflect. Like, he sticks out like a sore thumb in a lot of areas. I think that's why his performance was overly praised, was because he's being serious in a movie that's not that serious. But it also hampers his performance because he sticks out too much, and it comes across as him trying way too hard to be serious when he should be having more fun as this character. Now, don't play him like you did He Who Remains, because that was just an abysmally bad performance. But, you know, play Kang with like a more of a sardonic sense of humor, so that way you at least fit the tone of the movie that you're in. That's my opinion on that personally. But I do like certain aspects of it. Like, I do like getting the origin story of Kang and how he became and how he was able to do the things he did. I like the whole idea of multiple variants of Kang, which is established in the mid-credit scene of this movie and in the post-credit scene of this movie. So yeah, like, there is still chance to really build up the character as someone who can be this big threat. But establishing him as a villain in an Ant-Man movie kind of takes away from that, especially when Ant-Man kicks his ass. I can't stress that enough. Ant-Man beats Kang. It kind of takes away the mystique a little bit. But yeah, like when all is said and done, you get to the third act of the movie. You get the revolution led by Cassie. They're trying to take down Kane and his army. You got Ant-Man and Kang doing a little fist fight in which Ant-Man eventually wins. And as Kane, I think Kane gets sucked into a portal or something, and then everyone goes back to Earth. But but there's this ominous tone of that maybe Scott didn't really defeat Kane, and that Kane could still come back, which we all know that we all know will eventually happen. Of course, this goes to the mid-credit scene. So throughout the entire movie, Kane makes reference that he was exiled and he wants to get back at those who exiled him. We find out that the ones who exiled him were actually variants of him. There were Ramatot, Immortus, and another character called Creation or Crucian, variants of the Kang character. And these are the Council of Kangs, and these were the Kangs that exiled Kang away because the Conqueror version of Kang was too much to handle. So now these variants are planning a way to pretty much start the multiversal thing. And then you get the post-credit scene, which basically sets up Thor Low-Key Season 2, in which Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston see Victor Timely, a 1900s versions of the character of Kane, doing a seminar on time and things like that. So yeah, with all that being said and done, I know this review was really all over the map, but mainly because I think this movie is all over the map. Like, it's trying to do way too many things, but it has to realize it's an Ant-Man movie, and it doesn't need to do all these things. Like, there are certain aspects that I do like. I do like that this movie takes place mostly in the quantum realm. We actually get to see the quantum realm. We get to see how the quantum realm acts as its own little society. I actually enjoyed that kind of thing. I actually like that. I wish that you had a villain that reflected more. I wish that only MODOK was the villain and not Kang, because I think the movie would have been better off for that. You could still do like the mid credit, like you could still do the mid and post credit scenes with that build up the character of Kang, but I wouldn't have had him be the lead villain in my opinion. I would not have had Kang be the lead villain. I would have just had MODOK be the lead villain and have a story of him wanting to get revenge on Scott for putting him in the quantum realm. That could have easily carried this movie, and you could have still gotten some good moments out of that. Of course, you would have to completely just take away the cringe humor that you did with MODOK and make him slightly more serious, but with a sardonic twist to it. I think the movie would have been better off for it. Instead, you're throwing in Kang, you're throwing in all this lore, and you're basically turning an Ant-Man movie into this big event movie, and it just doesn't work. Like, it just doesn't work whatsoever. Is that to say this movie doesn't have some fun moments? No, it does. You do get some good character moments. You get some good character beats. I like the stuff with Ant-Man teaming up with his daughter. That was actually really nice and really cool. I like when Ant-Man goes big and he starts tearing down Kang's little town, little city, little civilization. That was kind of neat. So like, yeah, this movie did have some decent moments to it, but overall, for an Ant-Man movie, it tried to do too much and ultimately didn't do enough because, again, an Ant-Man movie does not need to be this big event movie. It just needs to be a scaled-down adventure. So, with all that being said, I'm going to give Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania a solid. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. It's a very uneven movie, but it's okay. It's not as bad as people are saying that it is. It wasn't that bad. I mean, you got people calling this one of the worst things I've ever seen, and I've seen worse superhero movies than this. I mean, this movie still, at the end of the day, it's entertaining for the most part, but in terms of story quality and the direction that it took, it could have done so much better. So yeah, 5 out of 10 for Ant-Man and Wasp Quantumania. Let me know your thoughts in the comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.